Welcome to Life in Sirens, Behind and on the Scene, a podcast by first responders. We're your hosts, Sophie,
Jamie,
and Aubrey.
The content provided in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policies or positions of any medical institutions, emergency medical services, or healthcare organizations. Patient privacy is a top priority, and all discussions involving real-world emergency situations are de-identified and altered to ensure confidentiality. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional or your local EMS protocols before making any decisions regarding patient care or medical practices. Listener discretion is advised, as some topics may include discussions of real-world emergency situations.
Welcome to another episode of Life in Sirens. On this episode, we're going to be talking about being new to the crew, not only as a new hire or preceptee, but also kind of the role of FTO or preceptor. We feel like it's something that is so important, setting that expectation and meeting goals right from the start can really either stunt or propel your career. So let's talk about it. I think that all of us have served as FTOs and or preceptors at our service, and we are lucky to have a service where we see a lot of students, like a lot of students. We see EMT basic students, advanced students, paramedic students, we see nursing students, we see residents, we see high school students, like we get a lot of students, and precepting is pretty much expected as an employee at our service. And then we have the role as FTO as well that you apply for, and it's more of a leadership role than anything, and you get new hires. So I guess let's first talk about the precepting role and kind of how we go about it, how we approach it, and what our expectations are as preceptors.
I think a lot of medics have a hard time with the preceptor role because they didn't necessarily ask to do it.
Yeah.
Like students come to your station, sometimes you don't even know that they're coming to your station, and then they're there. But our career depends on being precepted. It depends on going and doing clinicals and riding with these crews. So every single provider has been a student that needed to be precepted. And for these students, I just want you to know that we've also all been students, so don't let people treat you poorly, because now that they're not, it makes them feel good to be mean. Don't tolerate that.
Do not.
And as a preceptor, recognize that you don't want to be the preceptor that you had when you were a student, that you left that clinical and you were frustrated and you didn't learn anything and they were rude and you didn't want to ask questions because of that. I think that both students and preceptors should understand that there is a behavioral expectation.
100%.
And even if you weren't like, please give me someone to teach, it's a part of our job.
I just want to say, for me, when I approach a student or we have a student for that day, I wish somebody would have done this for me. And this is why I'm so aggressive about it. I let them know who everyone is. We have 2 trucks at our station. I let them know if there's one student, they can hop on whichever truck gets a call first. Usually they get stuck with that truck all day just because we run a lot of calls. But I let them know, like, the expectation and, like, kind of how things run at our service. I'm like, this is the truck. Come check it out. We're checking it off right now. You know, Aubrey has made a sign for our station that lets students know what the Wi-Fi is, where the bathroom is. I think it can be a really uncomfortable position to be in as a student, especially being those lower licensed students when you've never done this before. It's very intimidating. I was wildly intimidated. And I think that as preceptors and medics and EMTs on the truck, we need to know that most of the cases, they are intimidated. We do have those off-the-wall students occasionally that are very aggressive, weirdly. Very rare, though. Most of the time, they're timid and nervous about being there. So I think making them feel comfortable from the start sets a precedent of, like, you are safe here. Ask questions. Practice, what skills you need to practice. Like, I just want them to feel included in every call. If the student then does not participate, then we might have to have some conversations, but I think that's the hardest part, is having hard conversations with someone that you're not necessarily responsible for. They don't work for your service necessarily. You're not their educator, like in the classroom. Is it worth it?
Right. You can make yourself uncomfortable for a moment and have a hard conversation with a student that you may never see again.
Yep.
Or you can just let it ride and not say anything, and they'll leave in a couple hours and you don't have to worry about it.
And then they'll go to the next guy and they'll be like, oh my gosh, he was so mean because he corrected, missteps or inappropriate behavior or, just, it's okay.
Yes, when students are in their clinical phase of their education, that is the best place for them to fail. That is the opportunity to fail. You can fail big because you ideally have a human that is there to keep you from failing to the degree that it injures humans.
Right.
So make big mistakes, but if you're in an environment where you don't feel welcome or they have not even acknowledged your existence yet, it's really hard to do things to make big mistakes, to even have the opportunity to. We have a lot of students, like Soph said, and sometimes I'm not great at including them because maybe that day I just needed it to be me and my partner and we have a student and I'm like, oh, okay.
And we almost always have a student.
Right. And we've been there where you're really just not in the mood to teach that day, but you try your best, include them, encourage them to ask questions. For students, there is a kind of expected behavior that is hard to describe because I want you to be self-sufficient while you are in my station. Ask where the bathroom is, water is, know where the things are. Ask as many questions as you need to be self-sufficient while you're in our station. Do not necessarily make yourself at home. There is an expectation of student behaviors where crew members we want you to just get up, go to the bathroom, go get water, sit at the kitchen table, whatever it is. But just don't sit in a recliner.
You're still a learner, right? You're still a guest.
Right. I feel like that's the moment where people go from being like, this student was really comfortable with us, right, to being disrespectful.
And you are there. We're usually there for 24 hours at least. You're probably there for 8 to 12. So just keep that in mind. I know clinicals are exhausting. They're tiring and you have to use your brain really hard. You should be tired when you go home from a clinical, but then you get to go to your bed. So go take a nap in your bed.
You'll do yourself a big favor as a student if you never sit anywhere comfortable until asked.
Yes.
That was always my rule when I was on clinicals. I would always sit at the kitchen table with my books or whatever I needed to do unless I was done studying or another crew member that I was riding with had been like, hey, you can come sit over here. You don't have to stay there.
Right.
And that set up it's a very easy way to show them that I'm being respectful of their space. But yeah, it just seems silly, but you will see people's opinions sour quite quickly.
Definitely.
Towards a student for that reason.
Also, please don't be afraid to ask for food. I try to ask students so many times because Ashley and I have gone the whole shift and not ever fed this student. Please ask if you're hungry. We're not going to be mad. We will stop. We will order food. We will do whatever we need to do. Please tell us if you're hungry. I know that's seems like a comical thing, but I remember being a student terrified to say I needed anything. If you need something, please express your need. And that goes for inside the truck too. If you don't know what to do, that's okay. You can just say, what do you need from me right now? What can I do? No one's gonna be upset if you ask that question. I would say that would be very unlikely.
Absolutely not. Me and Jane were just talking about this the other day, actually. You can mess up a million times as a student on a clinical, and as long as you have a good attitude and you are interested in learning while you're doing it, that is all that matters. That's all that anybody is ever looking for in you as a student.
100%.
It's not how many IVs can I hit, or I can't talk to patients because I'm too scared, or none of that. None of that matters as long as you are willing to try and you have a good attitude. You're going to be great.
Be willing to try, be willing to ask questions, and be willing to be uncomfortable. This happened to Marshall and I when we were partners. We had an incredibly involved transfer of a patient that we brought to the closest facility for stabilization, and we stayed because we knew this needed to be transferred. It was just very involved. so we needed stabilization. But it was an incredible call for a student, and our student asked our supervisor, this was not the end of their shift, but because of where we were transporting to, they may have gotten off late. And they asked our supervisor if they could get a ride back to the station with them because they didn't want to get off late. Do not miss valuable opportunities to learn because
You potentially.
yes, you're going to get off late sometimes. That's just the nature of the game. That's how EMS is. And this was a paramedic student, so you already know. You're already involved in EMS, hopefully. It's uncomfortable sometimes. Our jobs are uncomfortable. We have to do things we're not always eager about, but do not compromise learning opportunities for your comfort. Sometimes things are scary. Sometimes things are uncomfortable. And I will never forget that student because we were just like, we were really hyped up about how involved this transfer was going to be and how much work we were going to have to do because that's what we live for. And they didn't want any part of it. So just remember that not only is writing as a student very formative for your education, it's also almost always a job interview.
Mm-hmm.
And remember that regardless of your background or how much experience you have or anything like that, just remember that we are all constantly learning. We are all constantly learning. So if you have not taken 112 of those exact transfers, there's a learning opportunity there. I run into this a lot with advanced students. I will not say a lot, but I have run into it with advanced EMT students. And I always phrase, honestly, like demands as a question because I feel like it is kinder. And so I will say, hey, do you want to get a line?
It's more collaborative, which is important.
Say, do you want to get a line? It's pretty clear that this person needs an IV, and I am telling you to start an IV, but I'm doing it in a way that makes you feel maybe not attacked. So
yeah, it makes you feel more comfortable being like, yeah,
it's more casual. Hey, do you want to get a line? And I've had multiple students say, no, I don't need any more. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So if you have started 15 IVs and you've now decided that is enough. I have started 5,000 IVs.
And you need 15,000 more.
And there are still days that I can't hit the broadside of a barn. And I think I'm pretty good at it. So you're 15. You are not even close to enough.
You're really going to regret saying that.
Yes.
When you get into that situation where nobody can get a line.
And even if in that situation, let's say the student has been a patient care tech for 10 years and they have been like credentialed to start IVs in that position and they've started thousands of lines, but I just don't know that. Just use the opportunity. Say, yeah, sure.
Also, I
be
love
a team
starting
member.
lines.
I know. I still love it. I still think it's so fun.
Just like be a team member and be like, absolutely, I can do that.
Yeah.
Your attitude towards learning goes a really long way. And if you're excited, like to Aubrey's point, then it can get you really far.
Speaking of excitement, one thing I do want to talk about is preceptors or FTOs crushing people's excitement.
Yeah, not cool.
Yeah.
Let people be excited. It's okay for a student to be excited about a call. It's really an exciting time. This is what they're signing up to do potentially for the rest of their life, and they're eager about it. Do not destroy that.
Right, I wish my adrenaline still dropped the way that it did when I first rode lights and sirens to a call. Like, I wish it did.
I know, me too.
Because, man, that was a good feeling.
I'd do anything to get that back,
yeah,
honestly.
do not, like, step on students that are excited.
Yes.
Because, gosh, I would give a lot to be that excited again.
And that's a good motivation. Excitement.
Yeah, and it's cute.
It is. I'm like, yes, I want to be part of somebody's
It's so
first time.
cute.
I love it. And they're like, I've never done that before. I'm like, we're going to do it right now. I'm so
amazing.
excited.
We're doing
Yes,
it.
it's amazing.
We had a student not too long ago that was super excited about everything and was just like stoked to be there. And I remember after that student left, we sat there and talked about how good it was for us to even be a part of that. Like, it was so healing to see somebody that excited about this job. It was so nice. They were precious.
Yes.
It was very cool.
Please
and
don't subdue your excitement. We get excited.
No.
we do.
We have
And
to reel
it's
it in
so
all the
good
time.
for us, for you to be excited. Because it reminds us to be excited. And as a student, remember that it is okay that you are new. It is okay that you are new, that you have not done this job before. It's okay. And so don't try to not be new. A lot of times I think, and people, it's human nature just to try to fit in. But they will try to fit in with these saltier medics and be like, oh, is it just this like a lame call? They don't even need us.
Yeah.
I hear that a lot sometimes. And I'm like, it's okay to be new. You do not have to be grouchy right now about our regular that we pick up 17 times a shift. You do not have to be grouchy about them. They might be really sick today. Let's be excited about it. Just because I'm grouchy does not mean you have to be grouchy.
Yes.
But so like be new. Don't try to act like a vet.
No.
Because man, it honestly isn't great.
It's not cute. Not a good look.
Mm-mm.
Not a good look.
Yeah, if you already are grumpy, then bad news bears.
Though we love your excitement, the one thing I do want to also talk about is embracing feedback in a way that doesn't hurt you. I used to get hurt by constructive criticism and constructive feedback very often. I don't anymore. People might still think I do, but I used to have a very sensitive, squishy heart. And I was just like, wow, I just suck. If someone would correct me on something. FTOs, preceptors, don't be afraid to make corrections because your ability to make a correction could save them from ridicule in the future and unkind people in the future. So if you're receiving feedback as a student, know that more than likely it's already hard for the person who's providing the feedback. No one loves to tell you did something wrong. And then learn from it. It's okay to make mistakes. That's why you're here, is to make mistakes. And honestly, you want that preceptor to confront you about their mistakes because I guarantee you they know your instructor. And if they're not telling you about the mistake, they're telling your instructor about the mistake. So I know it hurts sometimes, but no one's doing it because they're mad at you or they're trying to be mean. Those are the people who are working the hardest to provide you the best field education possible.
Yeah, and I think that it's also important to remember when you're in the field that, it's practice time. Mm-hmm. Like, when you're a student and you're in the field, it's practice.
We're not going to let you critically fail.
Yes, and in any other, whether it is a hobby, whether it's something that you really enjoy, or it's your job, in any other position, you practice before you're good. And so, this is what this is practice time. And also remember that a comment on your care, on your patient care, or your skill level, or mistakes that you made is not a comment on your character. So sometimes it's easier to separate constructive criticism from character criticism when you recognize that there is a difference. I do not think that you are a bad person and should not do this job because your IV technique is bad. Right. But I think that as a student, you really internalize a lot. So to your point, a comment on your patient care is not a comment on your character.
I think that's a good mention because I certainly thought it was. And also know that, especially as you get up to the paramedic student role, that there may be people in healthcare facilities, in receiving facilities, that don't necessarily understand your role as a paramedic and could be unkind to you because of it. They could be telling you the truth and just in an unkind way. But just remember, not everybody understands your role completely. So it's just something to think about when you're getting feedback from facilities. Because I used to be so sad when they would be like, well, why didn't you do this? I'm like, but I can't do that. That's not something I can do. I don't know what you want, but I can't do that. And I would just get so upset. Just understand that not everybody knows what your role is, what we're capable of. So if they are saying things like, why didn't you do this? They probably just don't.
Or vice versa. Why did you do this?
Right.
And you're like,
that's our protocol.
It's our protocol. Yeah.
And I think a lot of us, as we get farther along in our careers, sometimes it can be hard to lead with empathy. Just because you're like, well, why aren't you getting it done? Just do it. Mm-hmm. Just, why aren't you doing it? Just do it. Fold in the cheese. What do you mean?
Fold in the cheese.
Why aren't you folding in the cheese?
Fold it.
What do you mean?
David, fold it.
Exactly. People don't know what you're talking about. They have no idea what's going on. Why would you just expect them to, hit the ground running at your pace? They have not. They are not even jogging yet.
Absolutely. And I am only at my pace right now. I was not at this pace at all when I started.
Oh, no.
And so that's also always difficult, as I remember I had a partner that I was working with one day who was older. He's seasoned. man, dude's been through some things. I was a brand new teensy little baby. I did work for the county. I wasn't a student, but I was a teensy little baby, and I could not hit an IV to save my life. And this man would give me 30 seconds. 30 seconds. And if an IV catheter was not in some sort of skin, I was out, gone, bye. And if it was in skin and I was just trying to like figure it out, I still had another 30 seconds past that.
Yes.
And that was it. And then he would kick me out and do everything by himself.
One thing that helps me is with my partner, Ashley, I always have her, I'm like, Ashley, will you look for a line with insert student's name, or if you forgot the student's name, with the student. And then it kind of like takes my attention to other things, especially if that's their main priority, is they need to work on getting IV access as like a skill. And I'll just check in usually. I almost always give them complete freedom over there. I do not hover. I don't want to hover because
people
that's
hovered,
stressful.
Yes. People
so
hovered
stressful.
with me, and it made me
like,
horrible.
Yes.
Makes you so nervous.
Set them up for success. So one thing I do in the morning when we have students is I make sure we have towels. And Ashley knows when we have students that she just lays a towel in their lap. She doesn't ask them. We just put the towel in their lap.
Aww.
That's really sweet.
That's really nice.
Yeah, because they're going to make a mess. That's not going to hurt the patient, but they're going to make a mess because I still make a mess sometimes. Ashley knows. And I don't want them to feel embarrassed that they got blood all over the floor or all over the patient or whatever, or all over their pants. Like, just set them up for success. It's empathetic. It shows them that you care, but I also give them space. So here's all your things. Come over here. If I still see in a while that they haven't pierced the skin, I'll be like, how's it looking over there? Or I'll say something even nicer if I do know it might be a little bit of more difficult. I'm like, they're a hard stick, huh? Like, just, it sucks. Okay, it sucks. Don't call
And I
them
know
out.
in your brain, we've all been that student where you are, in your brain, you're like, when do I give up? When do I tell them that I can't find anything? Or that I did find something, but it's the only something, and I'm really nervous that I'm going to miss it, and then I'm going to leave you stranded with no access.
Or sometimes I'll give, like, subtle guidance, like, I'll ask the patient, are you right-handed? I'll look at and they'll be like, yeah. I'm like, well, sometimes you got better veins on your right side. If you're right-handed, let's look over there. And then the student will know, I need to look over there now. Just, it's okay to not be like, you have to do X, Y, Z. This is how you're going to do it. I think that's something that you guys wanted to talk about. Is like,
yes.
I also think that another thing that I struggled with when I was a student is, like, when I was a brand new student, I did not know what was an emergency and what wasn't. Like, to me, everything, like, they called an ambulance, it must be an emergency. So I would get so stressed if they were like, all right, look for an IV, and I couldn't, like, I would be panicking trying to get an IV. So now I tell students, if we will let you know if it's something that needs to be done in a critical time. If not, like, you don't even worry about it. Like, you just take your time, you get the IV.
Usually if they need a time sensitive one, I'll just be like, we need 2 lines. Ashley will try and the student will try.
I have a question actually when it comes to students and like skills. How many tries? 2?
That's kind of a hospital standard too.
Yeah.
2 tries next person.
Yeah. I would like to start my 3-part apology. This is something that Aubrey started doing to me. She started starting 3-part apologies. Sometimes it's just one, but there
But it has comic relief when you say 3-part.
Yes, there is a concept that Soph was talking about between guidance and autonomy. And I am not very good at giving guidance and still allowing autonomy. Because I'm very type A. I'm very specific, especially at work. Honestly, mostly at work. And I like things my way. And I feel like most of the time my way is the best way. And that is not true. There's lots of ways to do things. I have a really hard time letting go of my way in order to allow a student to have autonomy to work through their differentials and work through their process the way that works best for them. And sometimes I give guidance very specifically in my way's direction.
Right.
When Aubrey was in paramedic school, I did that a lot to her because we had been partners and she'd been an AMT. And so our truck was my way. And then she went to paramedic school and started having her way and would think through things differently and would process things differently. And initially I had a come apart, not like a mean one, but I was like, oh my God,
this is stressful.
because I just didn't know. I was like, this is not
Gonna
how
work.
I want to run this call. And Aubrey would be like, that's fine because it's my call. And I was like, oh my
You're right.
God.
Why did you say that?
And we had quite the transition phase, but just remember that your students, when they're in that position, allow them some autonomy.
Right.
I have a hard time with that, but it is very valuable.
As Austin Metter would say, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Oh, he does say
Man,
that.
he does say that a lot.
And there's plenty of options in getting to your end goal. It might not look exactly like yours, but as long as, protocols are being followed, patient safety is a priority, student safety is also a priority. All these things are happening. Like, it's okay to do it differently. And I think that's kind of where you and I are different. If we were both on a truck precepting students together, I think it would work really well.
Yeah.
Which this might be, because I'm more similar to Aubrey, I think. But
It does work really well
yeah.
between the two of us, yeah.
I guess I don't always correct because I'm scared to hurt people's feelings. And that's why I developed the method of being so, at fingertip reach. Because I want to stay uninvolved as possible, because I remember getting my feelings hurt a lot as a student. And sometimes that's not always great. You do have to be like, whoa, what are you doing? Stop that. Sometimes people get a little unhinged. I'm not saying that most students do, but that was really hard for me the first time I had to be like, what are you doing? Don't do that. Because sometimes you do, because people do things sometimes that are, and maybe someone taught them that on another call or with another service. There's always the, do as I say, not as I do situation. It's kind of like a baby. If you say the F word, they're going to say it too. These are our EMS babies. They might do something that they see on a call, and they think that's okay, and you have to stop them in the middle of that, and I hate doing that. How do you both, on a truck, balance that? How do you give the constructive feedback, but also be like, listen, we can't act like this. When do we correct behavior also? Skill and behavior. Who corrects skill on the truck?
I correct skill, she corrects behavior.
That's what I thought.
How we've normally gone about it is if something egregious is happening that needs to be stopped, it will just be hey, I'm going to take over right now. And we don't say anything about it in front of the patient. Our goal is not to embarrass you. Our goal is to just correct, get the job done that needs to be done right now. And then we
Debrief
always
after.
talk about it afterwards. Yes. We're very good about that, talking about things afterwards.
Yes, my goal is never to embarrass you.
That should never be the goal. Preceptors.
Patients don't understand the difference between different agencies, students. They don't know. It's not registering to them that you're in a different uniform or whatever it is. So if I make you seem incompetent in front of our patient, we all seem incompetent. So if there is a big mistake going on, it really depends on whose call it is, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, whoever's doing the skills.
But we will stop them and be like, hey, we're going to take it, or I'm going to start on this side if you can stop. And then we'll talk about it afterwards. A lot of times OBS, if it is a correction with a student that I think they would benefit more from, it's going to sound like I'm so cold-hearted, that they would benefit more from someone being kind and soft with them and being like, hey, this is going to work better. Let's try it this way. Right. Obs is more of an approachable human. And so I think that a lot of times they will receive criticism from her better. And so it works better that she corrects skill because they are more open to hearing what she says. Sometimes when people need a little bit of a more blunt, harsher correction, especially with behavior, that will be me.
I think that's a good thing to remember is know what your limitations are, what your current capacity is to precept, because obviously we're all getting students. We could be 5 calls into having a student, or we could be 500 calls into having students. Everyone's at different places. So I've done this, not with Ashley but with Austin. Been like, what the heck just happened? He's like, yeah, I'm gonna talk to them, because he knows I'm not gonna be able to. And I've gotten a lot better at that, but like it's okay to like talk to your partner first and be like, what do we do about that? What are we gonna do? Because sometimes it is like, at another service I worked at, I had a very bad student. Like it was like scary. He was like screaming at our supervisor. He actually got kicked out of his program because of this. Like it was wild. So like there is some crazy things that happen. Like humans are humans. You're just gonna, like, luckily these people get vetted out usually before they make it full time on a truck, but like sometimes wild things happen, and I guess handle as much as you're comfortable with. But if you do need to reach out to that school or their instructor, that's okay too, because some things are just like that had to be, which our supervisor did reach out to their instructor. We didn't even have to do that because it was so wild, but like there are some things that the instructor does need to know about.
Oh yeah, and recognize as a preceptor there is behavior that you do not have to tolerate.
Right.
There are, personalities and things that you are not required to tolerate if they are a problem. So just know that just because you have a student does not mean that that student gets to just be whatever it is that they're going to be that day.
Right.
You do have a right to like have behavioral expectations, things like that. My caution is just to make sure those things are understood. In the beginning, when you get a student, just be like, this is what we like to do on our truck. This is how we manage patient care. These are the things that are important to us on this truck. Do you have any questions? Do you agree, disagree, like whatever it is? But set your students up to be successful in your environment. So be very clear what that environment is. Our truck is like, we try to be nice to everybody, and we're relatively laid back, but when things need to be quick, they are quick. And so I always warn students in the beginning, I'm very direct. Especially on a call, I will be very direct. I need you to know that is not personal. It is for clarity. So we can talk about it
same way.
in a very casual manner afterwards. I'm not yelling at you. I'm not angry at you. It is for clarity that I am as direct as I am. But I do have to warn them, because if not, they will be like, oh, this woman.
This big mean lady.
She's so mean. She hates me.
Yeah, I think even at the beginning of your shift, if you are someone that's more direct, or you're someone who likes to debrief just after the call or whatever it is, just let your student know. Whatever way, or I guess whatever style teacher you are is fine, but don't be afraid to also adjust based on your student. I think, like Jamie said, some people need really intense, like, what the heck was that? They need reprimand. Austin, he'll tell you, he needs reprimand. Me, I'm like, I need somebody to be like, my dear, honey, sweetie baby. Like,
This maybe could have possibly, I'm not sure, but it probably was an issue.
Right, I already hate myself. I don't need you to hate me too.
Yeah, I probably know I did it.
And that's another thing. Often, people already know where they messed up. So, something that we've literally started doing in the last, which this is literally because I went to a class, in the last 2 weeks, was debriefing just after every call. I used to just be like, so, how do you think that went? But that really wasn't enough, because they'd be like, oh, it's fine, whatever. Now we just sit down, and usually we just sit in the truck after the call if the hospital's not too busy or something like that, and we just, while we're putting the monitor up or whatever, Ashley and I will just do a recap. We'll do a recap with each other. And then we'll tell the student if they did something really good. That's my prize. We're going to encourage them. And then if they need any corrections, then we correct them. But we say, but that was really good. If it was really, if most of the stuff was adequate, then I want them to know that they're performing with adequacy for their level. Like, I don't want everything that they are dreaming about to be crushed because I'm just a big fat meanie preceptor. Like, I want them to know they're doing well. Also, especially for those who have students for an extended period of time, or you're precepting a medic student, take pride in that. How proud are you going to be when this baby, angel, sweet precious paramedic student goes out on their own and becomes a real life paramedic? That's some pride right there. Or is just doing great things. You're just like, I helped do that. You don't want them to be like, oh, well, yeah, they precepted with Aubrey. What did you expect? They would never do that because Aubrey is also a sweet, precious baby angel. So on the other hand, we have field training officers, or FTOs, that work with new hires. So the expectation is obviously different. You've been through school, you maybe even worked somewhere else. How do we approach things as an FTO?
I think when you're an FTO, you have to recognize that there is a difference between FTOing and precepting. When you're an FTO, ideally, your goal is to orient this person to your system, to how you guys do things, your equipment, who they need to call, different processes, all of that. But you also need to make sure that they are competent within their scope of practice within your service. And so it's tough because you're looking at another provider, or we just say FTOing. I don't know if that's the correct term, but you are training a new hire that may be the same licensure level as you. They may have more experience than you.
Yeah.
And it's harder to correct because, especially in EMS, not every service is set up to where they are there for the success of their people. And so if they're coming from a service that was highly punitive and they didn't really care, they just wanted you to get on a truck because you're a warm body, and you start trying to give them feedback or direction or be corrective, they may take that poorly.
Or get really defensive.
Or any of the things. So my advice for FTOs is, because it is different and you will end up working with these people that are staying on at your service, ideally if they do well, is to really focus on like your style of communication and how you communicate feedback and how you set up and structure those conversations. If you set the expectation very early on with your new hire that like every day we are going to sit down in the morning, we're going to get up 30 minutes early, and we're going to recap our whole shift.
And I really think, I understand for sure setting the precedent and setting the expectations. Just if we rewind it a couple days, I really wish and hope that services are putting an extreme emphasis on their new hire orientation prior to FTO phase. Like, that really sets the precedent. The professionalism, the expectation, and everything that you put forth during those orientation days, that sets the whole freaking tone. And if you're not putting a lot of effort and organization into that, you're failing already.
Absolutely. And if as a new hire, you do not think that right now is the most important time to be on your absolute best behavior, then we are definitely going to see some behavioral problems down the road. Because I think that if your orientation is really casual or not that serious or whatever it is, then you feel like that's how your FTO rides are going to go too.
100%.
So if you, one, get an FTO that is pretty casual and laid back, then that confirms your original thought, like not a serious place. Or they're really intense
You're
and
like,
you
oh my
did
God,
not
they're so
see that
mean.
coming.
Yeah.
But I think it's important as an FTO to set expectations and to figure out your system for observing your new hire. Because it's really hard if, depending on what your system does, some people, their FTOs go and ride with them and they're already on a truck. Some people, the way that we do it is your new hire comes and rides with you on your truck. That can be hard because it's you and your partner and then a new hire.
Right. Including them, and even them being able to include themselves in the dynamic can be a weird situation, especially based on their experience, where they come from. There's so many factors.
Absolutely. And my goal when I'm precepting another paramedic, I just want to see how you handle yourself in certain situations.
Yeah.
I want to see how you handle yourself in really chaotic calls. I want to see how you handle patients that are like behavioral patients. I want to be able to see like your level of compassion. Do you thrive in chaos? Can you make good decisions quickly? These are all the things I'm looking for. Sometimes that's really hard to do when you're on your own truck with your own partner because you make those decisions.
Yep.
And it's hard to observe if they would have still made that if they weren't with you.
And that comes into that balancing guidance and autonomy, just like in the preceptor role. One thing I do think that is really significant that we should touch on is that there are services that do not have an FTO process. I just found this out the other day. There are services in our state, in our region, that do not have an official FTO process. You might ride with someone for like a day, and then it's your partner's job, even if they're an EMT at that point, to get you through the rest.
To like teach you
Yes.
functionality.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And that's terrifying. So if you do have an FTO program, great. But I do want to encourage that having one isn't enough. Being better than the worst isn't enough.
Absolutely. Take pride in your service and where you work, and when you are in a position to FTO somebody, remember that just because somebody is licensed does not mean that they're competent within that licensure.
Right.
And we see that all the time with every single career. You see lawyers that shouldn't be lawyers, doctors that shouldn't be doctors, nurses that shouldn't be nurses. Just because you made it through an educational licensure does not necessarily mean that practically it's going to go well.
Well, and I think that's another place we need to encourage our FTOs, is that it's not about making sure everything on this list gets checked off. This is a holistic process. It's about, can they do these things effectively, efficiently, with compassion, while other things are going on? It's not about just checking it off the list. If that was the case, then every service would just have a skills day, and you just run off the skills, and then you can hop on a truck. So remember, as an FTO, your job is not to just make sure they're proficient in skills. Absolutely it is. Not the only job.
Oh, for sure.
Well-rounded.
Yeah, I want to make sure that you're also like a decent human.
Affect is important, and I don't know if it's a state requirement, but I know some of the schools that we work with added affect to their paramedic, like, preceptor checkoff.
Yes.
Like, when you're precepting a new paramedic, affect is something that's factored in and they're scored on. I think that it would be very important to do that also with new hires. And I also think, as an FTO, remember that not always is that person a good fit for your service. Just because they got hired does not mean they're a good fit. They could be so stuck in their ways from their previous service or their previous ideology, bad attitudes, things like that, dangerous character. They do matter. I know we need people. We're all desperate for paramedics and EMTs. But we don't need to compromise poor patient care and poor culture because we need to fill a seat. I just attended a class, and one thing we really talked about is most people would rather be short-staffed, working overtime, running their butts off, than working with people that make them miserable.
I would rather be better and shorter and work harder than be worse and fully staffed.
Right.
And not have to work as hard. Because it's just not worth it.
And remember, like we talked about with the preceptors, take pride in your new hires. And if you can't take pride and say, that was my new hire, I FTO'd them. If you cannot do that by the end of your time with them, then they do not need to be signed off, or they don't need to work there. It's okay for someone not to be a good fit. There's a service for everybody. This might not be theirs.
In the same way that preceptors have a responsibility to just our field in general, to say like, hey, this student, there's some big red flags, and I'm to go talk to their instructor and say like, I do not think that this is going to be the career for them. These are the reasons why. The same way that preceptors have that responsibility, I do think that FTOs have the responsibility to say, look, there are some big red flags. Not like this is a personality conflict or we just don't jive that way, but like truly, like I'm concerned for patients in this moment.
Yeah. And the welfare of their coworkers.
Yeah. And yeah, how are they going to treat their partners and everything? And I do not believe this is a good fit. And hopefully you work at a place where they are receptive to that and are not just dumping them on another FTO to get them put through the process. Yeah. Because you don't need people that are raising red flags when they are on their best behavior.
And if you're an FTO or you have an FTO that isn't capable of letting you know when there is a situation that is problematic or isn't able to tell you when someone's not ready, then it's okay that they're not an FTO anymore. Because I think in this field for a long time we've really been stuck in the way of we don't demote and we don't fire. We have to. For the longevity and the sake of our profession, we have to start doing that. Sometimes we just need remediation, and that's okay. Because maybe things fell through the cracks before. But it's okay to demote someone from FTO if they freaking suck at it. You might have thought they were going to be really good at it, and that's okay too, and then they weren't. You have to be accountable if you are in charge of FTOs, FTO hiring, whatever it is, or even EMS hiring in general, to say, hey, we realized now that you're not a good fit. It's okay.
I would also like to, as far as this is a bit of a tangent, but as far as services go, to get away from the fact that you have to be in an FTO position in order to promote anywhere else. Because I don't believe that everybody's a good teacher.
You don't have to be a good teacher to be a good leader.
Yes,
you do have to be a good leader to be a good teacher.
Yes, I do not think that everybody that would be decent in a leadership position necessarily would be great in a training position. You can argue that training is a part of all of our jobs intermittently, but like for that to be your big role, I don't love that. That is a standard for a lot of people because it leads to a lot of humans that really don't have any interest in training new hires or training anybody at all in general.
Yeah.
It puts them applying for these positions because then that's the next
Well,
step to the next thing they want.
There are plenty of people in FTO positions that I do not want to lead me.
Yeah, there's plenty of people, honestly, there's plenty of people in FTO positions that we've had that I was like, I would not love it if you were my captain. But I would love it if you would teach me all the things.
I would love it. You're great at that.
Yes, but I learned so much from this human.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been plenty, and everybody's personalities are different. So, like, I may be that for somebody, or, vice versa.
We talked about this with the peer support program and other realms. Like, it's okay to not be great at everything. You don't have to be great at everything to be successful in EMS. You don't have to be a great FTO. You don't have to be a great peer supporter. You don't have to be a great supervisor to get somewhere in EMS. So we need to cut that out.
Yeah, I feel like that's just not our personalities, really. We're all just very, like, I will be the best at every single thing that I do.
And it is, but I want to remind people that it's just not possible.
It's not practical.
And I think that that's important when it comes to precepting and FTOing, to know your limitations. And if you're an FTO and for some reason you're going through something in your life and you need to go to whoever is in charge of the FTO program or whatever it is and say, hey, I need a couple months off from FTOing. I do not have the mental availability to come to work, do my job, and make sure someone else is doing their job. I just can't do it right now. If you can't do it, that's okay. If you need to take a break, take a break. And that's something for FTO programs. They shouldn't be like demoted immediately for that. That's part of just culture, right? I should be able to come to you and say, I'm going through a lot right now.
I need a minute.
Because it does take a lot of energy and focus and a lot of yourself to effectively FTO someone, especially sometimes we get more challenging cases. So if you are in charge of a program, let people, come in and out if they are having things outside of work or even if work got a lot, right? Give your people grace and room to say, I need a break. And know yourself. Don't just become an FTO because you want the title. Don't become a supervisor because you want the title. Don't become whatever promotion you're going for because of the title. So many people do that. And truthfully, you don't care about the profession if that's your goal.
If you're not going to do it well, you can almost be a detriment to that profession. Because if you don't want it for the right reasons. Now, I am not saying that there are not selfish reasons in promotion, because there are. But if that's it, then recognize that you maybe won't do that well, and that could be a problem for your entire service.
And your entire profession.
Because they need that position. And so if you're not actually interested in it, it's a problem.
If you're not inspired and excited about this field anymore, then it's time to step away from any kind of education role, because we all know as students or new hires, we showed up one day and they said, why are you doing this? You picked the wrong career. Like, we've all had people say that to us. If that is you, you do not need the extra 10 cents an hour.
You have not heard my voice very much in this episode because I am a new paramedic. I am not an FTO. And I've honestly had really great FTOs and preceptors and all the things that have helped me to get where I am today. So I'm just really thankful, and I would love to see more of it so that people can have the experience that I had. But with that, we're going to go ahead and close out this episode. Just a quick recap for you guys. Always remember to set the tone, set those expectations. Always lead with empathy. And remember that you can have guidance with autonomy. And that's all we have for you guys this time. So thank you for listening. You can always follow us on our socials, and remember, you can listen to us almost anywhere that you listen to podcasts. To see an exact list, go to our RSS feed.
And if you have some stories, tribulations, good, bad, ugly, of your experiences as students, FTOs, preceptors, any of and all of the things, please write into us. You can either comment or you can write in to us at lifeandsirenspod@gmail.com. And we will be reading some of these stories in episodes to come. So please send us all your things. You can send them in anonymously, or you can request that we state your name. Either way, we will shout you out if you want. See you next time.
This has been Life in Sirens, produced by 3 nerds trying to bring you content that you might actually care about.